Let's cross now to SABC political editor Mzwandile Mbeje. Mzwandile, what is the situation? What is the severity of the president's condition, if at all?
Well, thank you very much, Tsepiso. Indeed, we did hear the minister in the presidency, Jackson Mthembu, basically telling the media that the president would have been able to meet with Nehau and perhaps accept that memorandum of demands. But because the president was not well, so he went as far as to say he was in bed. And of course, we've been able to check with the presidency to find out the condition of the president currently. So the presidency has indeed confirmed that he is actually recovering from what they say is common cold. So I think he's resting right now so that he is in good shape. This week is quite intensive insofar as the work of the UN is concerned. So that's what they said. They said, yes, he has had a cold, but he is currently recovering, basically confirming some of the reports that Minister Mthembu had said earlier.
And I'm glad you mentioned this against the backdrop of the United Nations General Assembly, which we'll hear more from our colleague later on, Mzwandile. But I want to talk about the significance of this, the condition of the president. Was there a real health scare? Were there concerns that were being expressed about his conditions?
Well, when I spoke to Tyrone Still, the acting presidential spokesperson, he basically said, no, it's a common cold. So I guess because we are changing the season, we are now in spring. So normally people would get a common cold. But it's quite interesting, Tsepiso, given that during the COVID time, we did get reports. In fact, some health institutions were saying, because most of us were wearing masks, so as a result, so we did not really get what you'd normally get, the common cold. So the numbers were quite down. So clearly, the president is one of the few people, according to obviously the presidency, that has had this kind of common cold. But as far as his condition is concerned, so they said he's recovering. And then the reason why he has to rest, because as I indicated earlier, so he's got a lot of activities coming up.
And if we can just very briefly talk about those activities, as I said, Sharon Bryce-Pease will give us more detail, but to South Africans to help them understand the importance of the president being there at the UN General Assembly, especially at a time like this of a global pandemic.
Well, the president, Tsepiso, is not only, in this instance, the president of the country. You know that he's also the chairperson of the AU, so which means he also carries continental responsibilities. So what he says when he addresses the members at the UN General Assembly is not only confined to South Africa, it's something that also talks about the continent. Of course, he needs to articulate that position. In fact, one of the things really that has been said over and over again is that we are in a time during the pandemic, and he's been leading those efforts. In fact, given what we've been seeing happening around the world, is that some countries, particularly the rich ones, have tended to be very nationalistic in how they approach this whole matter. Given that he leads the continent, a continent that will benefit greatly should the vaccine be found, so he will really speak about the issue of multilateralism, because it's important that at this time when everyone is affected by the same pandemic, so we are able to put together as the nations of the world. So the United Nations is celebrating 75 years, and of course there are issues around the SDGs, there are issues that really require the world leaders to step up. And I can tell you now that the issue of coronavirus will certainly be topical, because the world has completely changed from what we used to know at Tsepiso. I mean, we are living in a new normal. So if we are living in a new normal, so the world leaders so have to then give direction as to how is it that they will do in making sure that we are able to adjust and adapt. And somehow, if we are able to find the vaccine, we adjust back to our old ways. Of course, it will never be completely the same. I mean, these kinds of meetings, I can see them going forward happening quite regularly, because in terms of cost, in terms of a number of things, they're actually quite saving. So these are some of the things that the president will be speaking about, of course, as the head of state of South Africa and indeed representing the African continent.
And just very quickly and finally, Mzwandile, in that recorded message, do you anticipate that Zimbabwe will make it there at the top of the list, given the concern around the instability in that country?
Well, obviously, Zimbabwe is quite an important issue. But remember, he will not want to single out perhaps a particular country. He would want to speak on behalf of the continent. And of course, he will want to articulate some of the South Africa's developmental wishes. So the issues really that are affecting the region, the issues that are affecting the continent will certainly be right up there.
Okay.
So, and of course, Zimbabwe will certainly in that way come up. So, of course, we can't forget about Mozambique next door, which is facing its own terrorism issues right now.
Thank you very much, Mzwai. SABC political editor Mzwandile Mbeje on the president's health. Earlier reports suggesting that the president was very ill, but the presidency now coming out to clarify. The spokesperson Tyrone Seal saying that the president is really just suffering from a common cold.